This might be one of the most passive-aggressive things the Pentagon has done in recent years. They have put the spotlight on a vessel known as the Behshad. The thing is this, the Behshad is a well-known Iranian-backed spy ship that no one's really known about, but really almost for the first time, the United States has said, we might strike it, we might not strike it, we'll see what happens. And now the whole world is like, hold on a second, who is the Behshad? What is going on? I'll let this clip speak for itself.
There's a ship called the Behshad, I'm sure you've heard of it, in the Red Sea, and Iran issued a warning saying the U.S. should not target this ship. They claim it's a counter-piracy mission ship, but it's widely believed that is actually a spy ship effectively providing electronic intelligence to the Houthis to help them spot targets. Is that a target that's off limits?
So first of all, I'm not aware of the U.S. targeting the Behshad. We are very well aware of the Behshad. As you've heard NAVCENT talk about before, it's pretty standard for Iran to have a ship in the Red Sea conducting operations, as you've highlighted. So that in and of itself is not unusual. And again, we're there, again, to support freedom of navigation, to work with the international community to ensure that vessels can safely transit this waterway. We are not there to seek confrontation or war with Iran. But if our forces are threatened, we will take appropriate action.
Okay, let's get into this. So the Behshad is a legitimate cargo ship. Like, it is documented as a worldly vessel, as a cargo ship. The only issue is it is tracked by open source, like underground hobbyists who track open source radar systems, and it is also tracked by the US military and really the whole world. This ship always seems to linger in the Red Sea and always seems to have military assets whenever things get a little crazy. Now, understand this, a lot of evidence is pointing towards the Behshad as being a spy ship, or at least working as a cargo ship, moving munitions across Iranian-backed militias because of this. Now, back in 2021, there was already a ship known as the Saviz, or the Saviz, and it essentially was caught carrying munitions, again, for Iranian-backed militant groups. The way that a lot of these Iranian-backed militant groups get their equipment is through cargo ship operations, either through the black market or underground operations. Nonetheless, they use shipping lanes. The only issue is the Saviz was caught holding these munitions, and not only that, the Saviz all of a sudden had a random explosion where it caused the ship to get towed back to Iran. And all of a sudden, the ship that replaced its operations was the Behshad. So if the ship was already caught carrying munitions and being sent over to Houthi-owned territories, had a random explosion, gets towed back to Iran, and all of a sudden the ship that replaced its operations, known as the Behshad, is in the area, we all know what's happening. The only thing is this happened back in 2021, and again, this was never like really mainstream news, and so now all of a sudden for the Pentagon to show the spotlight on the Behshad, everyone is watching the Behshad, and that is probably the worst thing that could ever happen to you as a spy organization. And again, this ship is extremely terrible at not looking suspicious. It usually travels with legitimate Iranian warships, one of them being the Alborz and another one being the Behshad. And look, the only reason why you would ever have legitimate military warships assisting you or being in your area is if you have very high value targets on that ship, or if you're doing some sort of secret operation. Other than that, there is almost no reason ever for a cargo ship to be assisted by naval vessels. I mean, even now, considering what's happening in 2024, the only reason why you have military ships in the Red Sea is to protect from attacks happening from the Houthis. And again, that is like the worst case scenario. Most of the time, vessels will just be asked to reroute, not have their government assets protected by legitimate military warships. That almost never happens. The only time warships get involved is if you're in a legitimate war or your ship gets attacked. Oh, and look, if you think I'm done providing the evidence on why the Behshad is clearly a very sketchy ship, oftentimes they will turn off their tracking systems or their global trackers, which you legally need to have. And if this thing shuts off, it must mean you might be sinking or something is wrong, but nonetheless, it is a known thing that this ship will just randomly all of a sudden turn off their trackers. So again, the Pentagon has put the spotlight on the Behshad, but the main thing or the main question is this: is the Pentagon and the US military willing to strike this ship? Well, Iran already has responded to this. As you may have already guessed, Iran has denied any sort of military action that has anything to do with this ship, which they should be doing because if it's a spy ship, why would you ever say it's your ship? Second off, Iran even said, don't even bother sending anti-piracy measures on the ship, don't even bother boarding that ship, that will be seen as an act of war. So Iran, unlike any of their other militant groups throughout the Middle East, this one specific target seems to be of a very high value. And Iran is saying, if you go after this one target, it's going to be a big deal, so stay away from our ship. And again, I'm not trying to make this confusing because I keep saying Iran is saying it's not their ship, but it is their ship. Iran is saying it is their ship in the sense of a civilian cargo ship capacity, but they are denying that it has anything to do with spy operations or forward observation operations. So, will the Pentagon strike this ship? Well, it was left a little open-ended. And at the end of the day, the Pentagon really does not even need to strike this ship, because this ship, the main mission it's really doing is providing information and intel for the Houthis for their launches in the Red Sea. And the launches have been extremely ineffective. And look, the United States is doing a risk assessment. Do we go after this ship and all of a sudden we have an international war with Iran and other partners that it's allied with? Or do we just keep squashing the attacks that is coming out from Houthi territories, over Yemen? Nonetheless, it doesn't seem like the United States doesn't have that ship out of its area of operation. Maybe it might have to strike that ship if we get to that point, but nonetheless, it doesn't look like the Pentagon is even worrying about that ship. Look, a lot of times, and even myself, we watch TikToks, we watch really dumb military videos where sometimes the US military seems a little incompetent, but when it comes to times of war and actually doing their job, that whole soldier mopping the rain in the motor pool, or soldiers doing really dumb things, this is not a thing in areas of operations where you're really in a war. Right now, Central Command is holding it down in the Middle East, and look, as much as they say they're not at war, we are theoretically at war right now, especially with Iranian-backed militant groups. And the main point I'm trying to get across is that the US military has all of its intelligence assets in the area. If you don't think the US military is watching that ship like a hawk, you are wrong. And look, the US military is very patient unless it doesn't have to be, because Iran has even put the US military in positions where they are pretty much baiting the US military to get attacked, such as seizing civilian cargo ships, such as utilizing Iranian-backed militant groups to keep launching more and more munitions towards the Red Sea, towards actual naval vessels, and towards civilian cargo ships. So look, the US military keeps getting pushed back into a corner, and not only that, the US military is not even done with its continuous operations of retaliation over the Middle East. So, will the US military strike this ship? Probably not. Could the US military strike this ship? Yes, and some. The US military could absolutely wipe the entire Iranian Navy off the face of the earth, and I have evidence to prove this. They've already done this in practice. The US military has proven they could quite literally, with a snap of a finger, eliminate the entirety of the Iranian Navy. This has been done already. So that is why the US military is not worried in a sense of Iran using their naval assets, using their spy assets or cargo ships, because at the end of the day, Iran is only destroying Iran. They have already been sanctioned by almost the entire world, and the last thing the country of Iran wants is to have an all-out war with the US military. So look, the US military has even acknowledged this, but this is the first time in a while where the US military has put the spotlight on this cargo ship, acknowledging they know it's there, they know it's sketchy, and maybe one day we'll strike it. We'll see what happens.